Shalom, family. We are not just in a feast. We're actually inside of a pattern. And that's what we want to look at today. It's a pattern. We talked a lot about how Yahawah has rhythm. And that's what we'll see today is this pattern, this rhythm that he has. And so each slide has scripture on it. We may not read, probably won't. We won't read all of the scriptures. So they're here primarily for reference, but we will read some. I'll ask if someone would like to read some as well. But just to start out with, and we look at Wayaqara, so Leviticus 23, 10 and 11, when you come into the land I give you, and shall reap its harvest, then shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. So here, it's already talking about first fruits. We're going to see a lot of scriptures that say first fruits in them. And this is when Yahshua was coming into the promised land, and they were to bring the harvest, the first fruits of their harvest. They would bring it to the priest. Now, that part, the priest, the book of Hebrews tells us that Yahawashai took the place of the priest. So the priests are no longer required in these feasts because they've been replaced. So the Levitical priesthood had been replaced. Yahawashai has become that for us. So, and then in verse 11, it tells us on the morrow after the Shabath. So that is first fruits on the morrow after the Shabath. We're going to talk about that and what that actually means. And then when we look at 1 Corinthians 15:20, Paryam Raashwan, but now Messiah has been raised from the dead and has become the first fruit of those having fallen asleep. So again, first fruit, Yahawashai, he's become the first fruit. And that's what this is all about as we look at Paryam Raashwan, first raised, Yahawashai, first raised. And we're going to see some scripture about that as well. So we've removed leaven. We've gone through the process of removing leaven, and that's what this particular week we're in right now is all about, removing the leaven, sin, corruption out of our lives. And we're right now walking in purification. So that's what this time period is all about, walking in this purification, this time of Matazah, Kag Matazah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is all about the cleansing, but it's more than that. But because there's something that's about to happen. So first of all, why cleansing? This is a time that Yahawashai died to remove sins. That's what cleansing is about. That's the parallel. We are observing this particular feast, but what happened is that Yahawashai died so that there was a cleansing could occur, because that's what his blood did. He cleanses us. Thus, when we remove leaven, that it symbolizes sin. And when we remove that from our homes, then we are removing that sin from our presence. So that's the idea of removing leaven, the yeast, anything that has leavening in it. That is our connection to removing sin, symbolizes the removal of sin. And then when we see Shabath, Exodus 12:15, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day, you cause leaven to cease from your houses. So that's the removal of leaven on this first day of unleavened bread. That's when we remove the leaven from our houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that being shall be cut off from Yahshua. So very serious. He's very serious about us removing leaven from our homes. And the process, I love what Yah said, is that every year learning more and more. I'm doing the same. I think we're all doing the same. So that's why I'm so grateful to be able to experience this with you, because we're all experiencing, we're growing, we're learning more. And so that makes this so much more powerful. So when we think about how Yahawashai, he died on the first day of Mathathyahawah, which is the fourth day of the week. That's when he died. He died on that day. So that day's already passed this week, but that's when he died. And that's when we began the removal of leaven, because it parallels with his death, which means the cleansing. His blood cleanses us, his blood was shed, and that was the cleansing that took place. And then what we see in 1 Corinthians, again, chapter 5, verses 7 through 8, therefore cleanse out the old leaven, remove it, so that you are a new lump. So we become new when we remove that sin from our lives, as you are unleavened, or in other words, without sin. For also Messiah, our Pesach, was slaughtered for us. So he was slaughtered, he gave his life because he was the Pesach. So then, let us celebrate the festival, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Again, unleavened, removal of sin, sinless. So that's what Mathathyahawah is all about. That's what we're in right now. But y'all, let's pause here and go a little deeper, because this is where many miss what this is all about. I personally have missed what this is all about. And so glad that we can talk about it right now, because as we've been walking through Mathathyahawah, removing leaven, examining ourselves, tomorrow is not just another day in the feast. I'm talking physically right now, tomorrow, the first day of the week. It is something that's special. And tomorrow is really a shift. It's a transition. It's a turning point in this pattern that we're experiencing through these appointed times. Everything up to now has been preparation, but tomorrow introduces something new. So let me ask, have you ever noticed that Yahawah does things in order? We've been talking about his rhythm. We've been talking about the patterns. We've been talking about how he has order to everything, Nothing is random. Nothing is out of place. So if tomorrow is set, then it must carry purpose. There's a purpose, the reason why he set tomorrow, the first day of the week, for a reason. And if it carries purpose, then we need to be ready for it. And that's when we look at Quahalith, which is Ecclesiastes 3:1, for every matter there is an appointed time, even a time for every pursuit under the heavens. But the first part of that verse, for every matter there is an appointed time. Why? Because Yahawah has a rhythm. He has rhythm to everything that he does. And then when we look at Wayaqara, Leviticus 23:9 through 21, not going to read all that, but just looking at some excerpts out of that. And you guys, take note of these scriptures, but just looking at some excerpts out of that. You shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest. So that's verse 10, bringing first fruits. Verse 11, on the morrow after the Shabath. He's talking about on the morrow. This is the pattern. Verse 14, do not eat bread or roasted grain or fresh grain until the same day that you have brought an offering to your Elohim, a law forever. So we are celebrating and observing something that's a law forever. And forever it doesn't have an expiration date. Again, these appointed times are laws forever. They will be practiced forever. They're even practiced in heaven right now. As we're celebrating, observing this feast, it's being celebrated in heaven along with us. So not only we are experiencing it, but heaven has never stopped experiencing it. And it's being observed there right now. So before I move further, any comments, thoughts, etc.?
Yeah, there's the pattern that has been really fun to see for me is kind of confirmation that we're tracking. And so this week that we've just done with unleavened bread, or Passover unleavened bread, and now we're about to step into first fruits tomorrow. Um, it's for me very, very confirming, because when we start from the start of the year aligning with the equal day, equal night at the end of 364 days and starting the year day 4, now, seeing the instruction in scripture for, okay, 14th day is Passover of the first month, 15th day of the first month is, Chag Matazah or Hag Mataza for unleavened bread. And now we're about to step into, okay, this is the Shabbat. He's rising today. He's going to be the first fruits tomorrow. And so seeing how the number of the days are tracking. But when you go into the first fruits, I think what's really, like, when your slide's talking about tomorrow, everything changes, is we're now in the harvest season. We're now in now that he's resurrected, he's the resurrected Mashiach. What does that mean for us? And what does that allow for the rest of the saints to actually walk into? Because the harvest is now referring to the body, right? That he's going to eventually, and I'm sure you're probably going to tap in on this, but I just love that we're seeing the patterns on the actual original calendar, trying to, make it sense on the Gregorian calendar as far as like the days that we're on. But for me, it's just opening. It's eye-opening to see, man, this is the redemptive plan for humanity, like laid out as a pattern and a rhythm for us, So anyways, that's what I wanted to chime in.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And yeah, when it becomes clear, becomes clearer and clearer, you can see the pattern happening right before your eyes. Yeah. Again, speaking of that pattern, if we walk this pattern, walk it out together, these are not separate events. It's really one unfolding process. This whole process just unfolds and it's all connected. And we see in certainly the entire book of Leviticus, Wayaqara, that entire book of chapter 23, rather, it gives us the entire flow, and it's all connected. And then when we look at Hosea chapter 6, verse 2 in particular, says, after 2 days, he shall revive us. On the third day, he shall raise us up so that we live before him. So this is one of those parallels, right? This is a parallel to what's happening right now. Right now, as we are, we're experiencing because this same time in the past, this same day, this same period of time has happened at the same exact time in the past. So Yahawah is allowing us to experience on this day, this period of time, this feast. He has celebrated, observed this time, made this appointment at the same time every year. Every year he shows up the same time every year. And that to me is just so amazing, so intimate, so caring that he allows us to actually meet him at the time that he's appointed, same time every year. And that's what we're experiencing now. So in this 2 days, we'll see how this fits. This 2 days, he shall revive us. And on the third day, he shall raise us up so that we live before him. And we'll see how that fits as well. But yeah, so this is a one connected, unfolding process. Pesach, the lamb is slain. Matazah or Matazah, no corruption because sin is removed. Paryam Raashwan, that's the first fruits, or when the first was raised, or Yahawashai was raised, because he's the first. He was the first that was being raised. And so it's all a pattern. And, it's all a pattern. Again, so Pesach showed us the lamb. The lamb was slain. There was blood covering. There was deliverance. And deliverance from what? Deliverance from sin. When we think about what's happening right now, the sin has already been removed. So this week, on the third day of the week, that sin was removed. On the fourth day of the week, that sin was removed because that's when the lamb was slain. And the lamb being Yahawashai. Then we get to Matazah or Matazah. We see here that there's no leaven because leaven's been removed. There's no corruption because that leaven represents the corruption and sin. And then what that means that there's nothing left to mix. So there's no mixing with tradition, no mixing with untruth, no mixing with lies. It's just purity. And that's why this period of time is signified by purity, because all of that has been removed. And again, it represents sin being removed, removal of sin. And this parallels Yahawashai's death, because when he died, sin was removed. Now, we have to ask the question, after cleansing, what comes next? And so I want to spend a little time here, because this is where it really gets pretty exciting. And because this is where the pattern itself deepens. This is where we have to really just kind of come back off the accelerator a little bit, slow down a little bit, and see what Yahawah has already shown us from the beginning. From the very beginning, he's shown us this. So if we go back to creation, we see in Genesis 1:14-19, that, again, we've read this a lot as we've approached this particular period of time, but we see in Genesis 1:14-19, that's the fourth day of the week. What did Yahawah do? He created the lights. He created the greater light, he created the lesser light, and they were put in place to rule. They were put in place to divide light from darkness. They have a purpose. Now, hold on to that, because that's important, because something happens later. And that's what mirrors this. So we fast forward that during this time of the stake, and what I mean by the stake, I'm not talking about the kind you eat. I'm talking about the long pole that Yahawashai was sacrificed on. that stake. And we fast forward.
Mathathyahawah, aka Matthew 27:45. And from the 6th hour, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour.
So from what time?
The 6th hour to the 9th hour.
So the 6th hour is around what time, you think?
I would say it's the middle of the day.
Yeah, so sometime middle of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, where the sun is shining bright.
Yeah.
That's the point. That's the point I want to get to. The sun is shining bright. But what does it say happen?
It gets dark.
It gets dark. So you have to ask yourself, why darkness? Why at that particular moment? Because it wasn't random. Not random at all. It reveals something. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I was just saying, it's the light of the world. The light of the world's about to die.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's a sign.
Mm-hmm.
It's also it's a witness. And again, it's the 4th day of the week. And we know that in Genesis 1:14, the lights were created on the 4th day. Those lights were established on the 4th day. But at the stake, this is when we see darkness. And it covered the whole land. And at that moment, the light itself, it was being given. And it allows us to understand that Yahawashai, that he is the light. And when we look at, someone say something? So when we look at John 8:12, we see something else. And the excerpt out of that says, I am the light of the world. That's what Yahawashai said. It says, I am the light of the world. And so what are we seeing out of this? The world goes dark as the light is being offered. So Yahawashai is the light, he's being offered, then the world goes dark. This is the transition point. So we're going from cleansing to something being raised. Because after darkness, light returns. After burial comes a rising, the rising of Yahawashai. He was buried and then he rose. This is why Hosea 6:2, what we mentioned earlier, what we read earlier, and it's on this slide as well, but when it said, after 2 days, he will revive us. And on the 3rd day, we are raised up. What happened to Yahawashai? The 3rd day, he was raised up. And this reviving, after 2 days, he will revive us. That's the cleansing. That's the cleansing that's taking place because of his death. So the question is not just what comes after cleansing. The deeper question really is this: do you recognize the moment when darkness comes? It comes before the rising. Because the pattern shows us this: darkness itself is not the end. It is the transition. Right before life is revealed, there's darkness and then there's life. Yahawashai, his rising, represents life. So darkness covered the land, but it couldn't stop the light from rising. And that's the important part. That's the powerful point. That even though darkness covered the land, it didn't stop the light from rising, because the light, Yahawashai, he rose. That 4th day of the week, light was created. The light went out because of the sacrifice. Yahawashai, he said he's the light. And when he died, the lights went out. On that fourth day, he died. That's the first day of unleavened bread. And the light in the sky went out when he died.
Luke 22, verse 7 is one of those anchor verses as well for what we're talking about. Because it straight up says, this is the first day of unleavened bread. And that's the day that the Pesach has to be slaughtered. So the first day of unleavened bread, as we know, is day 4.
Yeah.
Because it's the day after Pesach. And scripture is confirming there in the renewed covenant that that's the day that he has to be slaughtered, the day 4. And then, the Matthew verse that we read showing the lights going out on day 4. So yeah, scripture's giving us the clues all over.
That's what's exciting, when we can just see it and then we can study it. If it's not completely clear, it's okay. Continue to press, continue to study. When that light bulb comes on, you won't be able to turn it off. When everything just fits together perfectly, but you'll see it clearly. Why on the fourth day of the week when the lights were created? Why Yahawashai say he's the light? And when he died, that light no longer was there. So I literally believe the light of the sun was turned off, not covered up, but turned off. The question was on the previous slide, what comes after cleansing? And so the cleansing is that the first is raised. That's the cleansing. Not, and this is, when we talk about the harvest, this is not the first. It's not the whole harvest. It's not everything at once. It's just the first. And that's what matters. It's the first. Because Yahawashai, he always, or Yahawah, as we have been talking here and as we know, he just always has a pattern. And in that pattern, there's always a first. So the first sets the standard. The first is what's accepted. The first is what opens the way to everything else. So tomorrow, literally tomorrow, is not about quantity. I think this is also important. It's not about quantity. It's about order. It's about doing things his way. It's about the moment where something is brought forward and acknowledged before anything else can follow. And when we look at James, Yahawah 1:18, having proposed it, he brought us forth by the word of truth, for us to be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. So a kind of first fruits, another reference to first fruits. And first fruits is important to Yahawah. Let's look at it a little closer, particularly at the timing, because this is where, with Yahawah, precision matters. The scripture doesn't say whenever you choose. It says on the morrow after the Shabath. That's what we read earlier in Leviticus 23. So we see this in Leviticus 23:11 to Leviticus 23:15 that we read earlier. On the morrow after the Shabath. We are experiencing Shabath today, and it's saying tomorrow, after this day, is something special. And that also means that this day is anchored. This is the anchor point. This Shabath is the anchor point. It's fixed. And it comes, something's going to happen after rest. After rest has happened, something occurs. At the end of the Shabath, something happens. There is a rising that occurs. And it's not coincidence. It's all by design, because rest comes first and then life. The death of Yahawashai came first and then life. Completion comes first, then something new begins. So if we move this day, or if we ignore the timing of this day, we actually break the pattern. This pattern we're talking about, if it's not done according to Yahweh's appointed times, then the pattern is broken. And if we break the pattern, we miss the meaning. The whole meaning is destroyed because we break the pattern. And that's what's happened over time. The pattern's been broken. The feasts have been ignored. The feasts have been celebrated on the wrong days. The feasts have been given the wrong definitions. The activities of the feast have been distorted. The pattern's been broken. And now we have the pleasure of restoring that pattern and being participants in the right pattern. At the